Hey everyone, Warix here. So 10.2 has been announced. Hopefully we get it soon. 10.2 came before the BlizzCon convention, which was kind of surprising to me, but I think they knew that they needed to do something to regenerate interest in the game, in my opinion. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to start by taking a look at just the class tuning on this, and then we'll do different videos. You can see I got tabs set up for different videos that I'm going to be talking about here. So I'm going to do one here that's on the class changes, one that's on the tier set bonuses, and then one kind of on just miscellaneous topics that I have found the most interesting going into season 3 of Dragonflight. So what we're going to do is we're going to start and talk about just the class changes. So we're going to start with Unholy Death Knight. This is a spec that I do play. I play more Frost than Unholy right now, but I think this is still interesting to note. I don't know why I'm wearing this. I can take it off. All right. So we're going to start with, let me make this a little bit bigger here. Hopefully you guys can read that better. Developers note, in Guardians of the Dream, we are looking to redistribute Unholy's damage profile. Unholy has some of the highest bursts in the game, which means most of their damage profile needs to be tuned around that window. The goal with these changes is to reduce their 3-minute burst while increasing their rotational damage and giving more of their impact to their 45-second windows, which should allow for an overall more healthy damage profile across a fight. We still expect Unholy will still excel in their gargoyle windows, but they should now also have a little more impact outside of it as well. So I actually really like this intended goal. Unholy was one of those specs that it's kind of like Fire Mage, and it's a little bit like Demonology, where once you're inside your cooldown windows, you feel extremely powerful, but once you're outside of those cooldown windows, not so much. Now, Fire Mage benefits from the fact that combustion is up quite a bit, but for Unholy and for Demonology, both of these specs do have like very set core cooldown timers, because you have to do setup in order to make these cooldowns feel effective. So the fact that they were doing like millions of damage per second inside their cooldown windows and then less than most of the healers outside of it, it's a really bad gameplay loop that I hope that they kind of get rid of. I'm not saying you should get rid of like cooldown based classes. I just think you should make it not so peak and valley. So what have they done to do this? Unholy Assault now increases all damage dealt by 20%, which was granting 20% haste. Basically it's because it was just getting overstacked on haste and makes their stuff a little bit unwieldy. I'm fine with this. I think this is a good change. Ultimately, it still gives the 4 wounds, which is kind of the big thing that you really use it for in Mythic Plus, and in Raid it just allows you to go into your a quick burst into your Apocalypse. That's really the thing that goes behind it. The damage increased is just going to make that window feel a little bit more maintained. Your main ghoul is increased by 10%. Summon Gargoyles damage reduced by 30%. Soul Reaper damage increased by 20%, so getting extra execute damage. Army of the Dead damage of the ghoul is reduced by 25%, and ghouls summoned by Apocalypse now have their own scaling from Death Knight stats separate from Army of the Dead, which allows them to basically tune the two abilities as independent of each other. I did not know this was actually the case, so I think that's a very good and very interesting change. Apocalypse ghoul damage increased by 12%, Death Coil increased by 12%, Scourge Strike increased by 12%, Festering Strike damage increased by 20%, and the Festering Wound damage increased by 10%. As someone that does like DPS DK, I actually think this is a really good set of changes. I think this is a good start. Now the math nerds, Taysnack, Biceps Pumps, and guys like that will sit down and determine exactly what kind of impact this has numbers-wise on the spec. But from a flow, feel, and just kind of a looking at it off the top of my head, I'm actually reading these for the first time, so I'm reacting to these kind of as we go here. I think this is a really nice set of changes that should really impact Unholy in a positive way. Makes it so that it still feels really good in its cooldowns, but you don't feel as bad outside of it, and your cooldown windows are a little less intense in terms of the damage profile that you're doing, which means that instead of, you know, these extreme peaks and valleys, you're talking like, you know, going up and down. Like you go way up and then you come way down, and you go way up and then you go way down, something like that. You're not going to be like up and then you come down like this, and then you go up and then down like this. So it's much more of a hill than like a series of mountains that you would expect young kids to draw. Demon Hunter basically are getting a talent tree rework. I think this is fine. I think Demon Hunters haven't really seen a lot of changes this expansion other than aura buffs, but I know that there's some fundamental problems that a lot of Demon Hunters talk about with the spec. that either gets held up by borrowed power, the tier set bonuses, or it's just not been addressed yet. So hopefully they get all addressed. If you're a Demon Hunter player, definitely let me know what your excitement is, or if there's anything you want to see specifically for your favorite spec. Tell me in the comments. Druid, innervate duration is now 8 seconds versus 10. I have to wonder if this is something a little bit more along the lines of just kind of nerfing mana regeneration across the board, because they're also talking about this. There's a blue post on this. We talk about this here, but we'll get back to that in just a second. Let's finish Druid and then we'll go switch over to that. Balance. Developers note, in Guardians of the Dream, we'd like to diversify balanced Druid talent builds in order to in different content and provide more viable options. Wild Mushrooms was too expensive to compete with other talent options, so we combined it and Fungal Growth into a single point. Wild Mushrooms is now a choice node with a revised Orbital Strike that is no longer tied to Celestial alignment. You can choose the steady damage of Wild Mushrooms or a less frequent big burst damage of Orbital Strike. We have removed the conflict between maintaining Rattle the Stars and maximizing Star-Lord. We likely save the resources to spend during Eclipse gameplay of balance and feel Star-Lord epitomizes it better. So before we get into the changes, I actually like this a lot. Now, I have been on record saying that I am actually a big fan of the way Balanced Druid currently plays. I am always a fan of the spec when it feels like it's in a damage that profile that focuses more on their nukes rather than on their dots. Whereas in Vault of the Incarnates tier, it was a much more dot-based oriented playstyle that punished you and had major ramp-up times and punished you basically if you mismanaged it. So that said, I understand that there needs to be a little bit more value in having a more dot-based focused gameplay that allows for some different damage profiles to happen. So I'm down with it. I'm still probably going to play the more standard Nuke Starfire Wrath gameplay because that's what I prefer out of my Balanced Druid. All right, 2% aura buff, fine. Nature's Grace now grants 10% haste instead of 15. I think that's fine. Power of Goldrin damage increased by 20% and was moved to where Star-Lord was located in Fractures of Time. Okay, I like that. Star-Lord and Power of Goldrin switch places. I think that makes a lot more sense. Power of Goldrin just kind of felt really out of place, especially in AoE builds where you didn't really use Star Surge all that often. So it switching places with Star-Lord just feels a little bit better for the pathing in the tree. Rattle of the Stars has been redesigned. It is no longer a buff that stacks when you cast Star Surge or Starfall, and is now a passive bonus that always reduces the cost of Star Surge and Starfall and increases their damage by 12%. I think that if it still stays in its choice node, I think that means that it's going to be the pick there all the time. Because anytime you can get just a passive damage and also AP cost reduction, which means you get to do more AP spenders, I think that's a good thing. So I'm a fan of this. I like Rattle the Stars in its current concept, but I also like that it's being kind of tweaked so that there's not any conflicts. Orbital Strike. Call down a bombardment of celestial energy over the target area, blasting all enemies for astral damage and applying stellar flare to them for 16 seconds. Generates 30 astral power, and it still hits enemies in a 40-yard line and has a 90-second cooldown, now a choice node with Wild Mushroom. So I really like this. I think Orbital Strike would have a really good place in a burst AoE setting. So I think in raid AoE, it'll be a really nice talent point to pick up. Maybe not on you think of a fight like Echo of Neltharion where you have your ads, or on Sarkareth where you have your ads. Having a Orbital Strike ready for most, if not all of those windows, I think would be a really nice damage profile to have. Whereas Wild Mushrooms you could use for more Mythic Plus where your AoE is going to be a little bit more sustained. So you can get some maximized effort out of that. So I really like that change. I think it's really good. It allows for some choice options, and you can see niche cases being useful for both options unless there's just one that's strictly tuned better than the other. Of course, Fungal Growth now included in Wild Mushrooms. For those of you that are not aware, let me just do this real quick. Talent trees, Druid. So Fungal Growth right here, basically they get damage for an extra additional 70% of damage over 8 seconds and are slowed. So it's not just combined in with Wild Mushroom. I think that's a really good change. I really enjoy that. All right, Feral Druid. Some minor shakeups to Feral in Guardians of the Dream. Apex Predator's value varies a lot in single target and AoE. True. It definitely scales better the more targets you can Primal Wrath, and you basically have it up all the time, whereas single target, you kind of are fishing and just praying. So they're evening that out a little. We're trying a new version of Ashmane's Guidance, so that's the Incarnation ability, as we don't love the randomness of the current version with the updated Berserk design. It does have awkwardness to kind of push people into Convoke the Spirits for this tier as a result. It's hard to optimize its damage and resource generation without using external tracking mods. True. The new version will have a more consistent value and reward you for maintaining your most important bleeds. Good, good, good. So we'll see what that looks like in a second. Apex Predator's chance to trigger is increased against a low number of targets and decreased against a high number of targets. So 4 is kind of like the sweet spot, and then anything more, anything less, it's going to allow you to have a bit more evening out of Apex procs. I think that's a good change. I really like that. Cat's Curiosity has been replaced. Good, because Cat's Curiosity was kind of crap. It's never been any good. With Saber Jaws, when you spend extra energy on Ferocious Bite, the extra damage is increased by 40 and 80%. So it just makes it so that when you play a pool your Ferocious Bite energy gameplay style, it just enhances that gameplay style, which right now you're pretty much always doing that. So I could see definitely Saber Jaws being a talent that you really kind of have to pick up and look into. Ashmane's Guidance effect for Incarnation Avatar of Ashmane has been redesigned. During Incarn Avatar of Ashmane and for 30 seconds after it ends, your Rip and Rake each cause affected enemies to take 3% increased damage from your abilities. Cool. I think it's a nice little change. Makes it's a little bit more boring, but it does smooth out the damage pattern a lot and allows for a really nice buff to Feral in both single target and AoE, which it's really good in the latter, not so good in the former. Restoration got a bunch of changes. Cenarius's Guidance Incarnation Tree of Life functionality has been redesigned. During Incarn Tree of Life, you summon a Grove Guardian every 10 seconds, and it's reduced by 5 seconds when the Grove Guardian fades. Okay. Grove Guardians, I know, is going to be a newish talent that's coming in, or is a new talent that has come in. I haven't played with Resto Druid a lot yet. Been focusing more on Mistweaver Monk when I do my healing, because that's the healer I enjoy the most. But I know the Grove Guardians is kind of been an interesting thought process and an interesting conversation that's been going on amongst the few Resto Druids that I know. They also additionally empower Wrath, causing it to deal 20% more damage and be instant cast, so it allows you to do some damage even while you're inside your big healing cooldown tree. Nice, I like that. Reforestation now grants Incarn Tree of Life for 10 seconds versus 9. I think that's good. Liveliness, your damage over time effects deal their damage 25% faster. Your healing over time effects heal 5% faster. So that basically replaces the old Circle of Life and Death talent and just tweaks the numbers so that you get stronger dots, but not necessarily stronger hots, which I think is fine. Grove Tending's healing increased by 30%. Cool. Grove Guardian's Nourish healing decreased by 16%, but its Swiftman was reduced by 20%. And the Wild Growth healing from Wild Synthesis is reduced by 20%. So Grove Guardian, obviously a very powerful ability, obviously, and so they're making some balance tweaks to that. Luxuriant Soil now causes Rejuvenation to have a 1 to 2% chance to jump to a nearby ally versus 1.5 and 3. I think that's not a big deal. Regrowth Initial Healing increased by 20%. Regrowth Heal Over Time effect increased by 42%. Rejuve Healing by 25%. Wild Growth Healing increased by 15%. So this is all basically in a mindset that we're going to get into, and I kind of get an idea of what they're trying to do here is I think they're trying to make spot healing feel better, which I think is good. I'm a fan of that. We'll get into the blue post and see if I'm right, but that's what I get with those changes is that they want to make the spot healing feel better versus trying to pump everything into these like big cooldown windows. Wrath and Starfire damage increased by 90%. Good. Makes a caster, Resto Druid, Moonkin boomboxing build feel a lot better. Abundance caps at 12 stacks for maximum 60% crit cost reduction. Okay, I think that's fine. Abundance was very powerful, especially when you were playing these Rejuve spread builds and you were just getting like 18, 19 stacks of abundance, and it just basically made your regrowths incredibly powerful. Probably a little bit too powerful. Cenarian Ward healing increased by 25%. Good. I like Cenarian Ward as an extra hot. I think a lot of people have always enjoyed Cenarian Ward for what it does, so having it be a little bit more powerful, I like that idea at least. Swiftbend also increased by 30%, but again, I think both of these go into spot healing. Inner Peace now reduces the cooldown of Tranquility by 30 seconds versus 60 seconds. Okay, probably to nuke the cooldown. Again, the effectiveness and potency of healing cooldowns. Spring Blossoms healing reduced by 25%. That's fine. It was very powerful. Embrace of the Dream healing reduced by 30%. Not the biggest fan of that. Flourish now extends the duration of all your heal over time checks on friendly targets within 60 yards by 6 seconds versus 8, and increases the rate of your heal over time effects by 25% versus 100% for 6 seconds instead of 8 seconds. I actually like this change. Flourish is incredibly broken right now. To the point that if you can get your good Redrew spread with your abundance out, you get a good tree of life going, you can have like 15, 16, 17 Redrews out. You can have regrowths on 7, 8, or 9 people. You can have 2 life blooms. You can have wild growth out on 6 targets, and then you just flourish all of that, and you are just cranking healing for that period of time. Flourish procs from Convoke the Spirits now extend heal over time by 3 seconds instead of 4. That's fine. And then they nerfed the tier set bonus to go along with that. So now that I've seen kind of what the changes are to Resto Druid and having some understanding of Resto Druid, let me see if this blue post on this is correct. Let's go take a quick aside over here to healing and throughput. Healers have a lot of decisions and resources to manage that change depending on the type of content you are doing. At its core, we want healers to have interesting abilities and choices to make while healing, and we want you to have to manage your mana pool. We're hoping our changes reduce the amount of overhealing and make mana matter slightly more, which should make healing across the game a more enjoyable experience. Okay, I don't know if I totally agree with that, but okay. Single target healing spells currently don't feel like they move the health bar enough. I will agree with that. We want these heals to be impactful and have a purpose, and hope this makes healing a Mythic Plus dungeon less stressful for healers. I mean, that's really correct. Like, you really had to do things like, I know on Mistweaver, for example, because I've been doing a lot of that lately in Keys. If I didn't really have like a good Ancient Teachings window, or a Sheelan's Gift that got off really, really nicely, like, you were kind of just praying that Ancient Teachings Smart Heal would Smart Heal enough. Group healing spells have seen a lot of modifications and increases to their total throughput over the course of Dragonflight. These spells often feel like they are rapidly increasing a raid from a damaged state to full health state and adjusting the effectiveness of many of these spells. But they buffed wild growth. Raid survivability cooldowns feel like they have all entered the territory of making your raid feel nearly invulnerable. Same thing for other raid cooldowns, such as Rallying Cry, by the way, Blizzard. While it's a great moment for everyone to stack in a Power Word Barrier and reduce damage taken and stack a few healing cooldowns, we think the combined power of these has escalated to a point where they make the raid slightly too sturdy. I would agree. If you can, especially if you do a really good job of rotating your cooldowns, your raid is never really in danger. And I think that's a kind of a problem. Mana generation is a problem that's related to all of the above. We want mana to feel like a finite resource, and for the few ways you can still generate mana to be relevant, but want your spell choices during a raid fight to matter. We're reducing effectiveness, many mana restoration cast abilities to specific items. Okay, so yeah, so kind of what I thought was going to be the case was that they took the spot healing effects of regrowth, initial healing, Redrew getting a buff, wild growth strains they got a buff, even though they want to nerf group healing, whatever. But basically, they want to make spot healing, single target spot healing feel better, group healing feel less powerful, and raid cooldowns feel less powerful, and then mana generation to be a little lower on the scale. I think that's mostly okay. I think you have to be very careful with specs like Holy Priest and Mistweaver Monk that have a lot of mana problems kind of already, and this is just going to make that worse. So I think it's going to be an interesting gameplay loop and a balancing act for mana generation that they're going to have to really pay attention to. Evoker, Devastation. We are reducing the effectiveness of Mastery Giant Killer and adding a health floor for damage bonus. I think that's actually a good change. Basically, if you weren't inside Dragon Rage, or you were fighting high health targets, like Devastation's damage just really started to kind of careen off the cliff. And with Dragon Rage and in the talent Tyranny, like, it made that feel less bad, but it basically made the spec entirely reliant on its cooldown, which again, it's something that they don't necessarily want the spec to do. So they increased the damage across the board by 5%. The mastery was reduced by 25%, so 180 mastery at level 70 now grants 1.5% mastery versus 2%. And the damage no longer falls off once the target reaches 30% health. I actually like that change a lot. So you're making it so that once, you know, the lowest amount of damage or the lowest amount of gain that you're getting at a max tree is at 30% health, which means even in the execute phase, where mostly that's where the most important damage for the boss comes from, the Devastation Evoker is still feeling like it's contributing in a way it's meaningful. Preservation gets a lot of these spot healing type things, as we've talked about, with Spring Bloom, Living Flame, Verdant Embrace all getting increased. Resonating Spheres applies Echo to the first 3 allies it hits instead of 5, again reducing that group healing utility. And Cycle of Life now accumulates 10% of your healing over 8 seconds versus 15 and 10 seconds. So again, a nice little shift in power is what they're trying to do with these healers. Hunter, let's talk about Beast Mastery. Aspect of the Wild and Call of the Wild have struggled to be compelling choices during Dragonflight. Correct, they haven't done anything. Both of these cooldowns were competing for similar design space to make sure you and your pets felt stronger in a way that feels different than Bestial Wrath. After evaluating these abilities, we've decided to replace Aspect of the Wild entirely and convert it into a passive option, and the removal of Aspect of the Wild allows them to double down on Call of the Wild being a strong pet summoning cooldown for the Beast Mastery spec. We're also lowering the number of talent points from Thrill of the Hunt and Dire Command from 3 to 2, which should give you some extra flexibility in your talent choices. I think this is good. The Hunter tree is kind of the oldest tree, so to speak, with the Druid trees getting some love over the time. Hunter trees were not far behind, and they still had a couple of different 3-point talents that were just felt really bad and really limited build diversity. Thrill of the Hunt and Dire Command, definitely the two biggest problem specs or problem nodes out of that, so glad to see that they recognize that and go from there. All right, so Aspect of the Wild again has been removed. I think Aspect of the Wild wasn't very good at all, and you really only used it for well, really no purpose in Dragonflight since they kind of redesigned it. So glad it's gone. Savagery, new talent. Kill command damage is increased by 10%. Barb shot lasts 2 seconds longer, and it replaces Aspect of the Wild. I like that. Anything that can make maintaining Barb shot and your frenzy windows in particular a little bit easier, I'm down for, since it relies so heavily on that pet damage and that frenzy buff being there. Master Handler has been redesigned. Each time Barb shot deals damage, the cooldown of kill command is reduced. Cool. So some good single target there. Call of the Wild has been slightly redesigned. Cooldown reduced to 2 minutes versus 3 minutes. Good. And the base ability now also has the added functionality. Whenever Call of the Wild summons a pet, the cooldown of kill command and Barb shot are reduced by 50%. Good. Choice nodes have been updated. While Call of the Wild is active, all of your pets are affected by Beast Cleave. Great AoE option there. And then they all cast Stomp when any time Call of the Wild summons a pet. Great. And then while it's active, each time you kill command, your kill command target takes 3% more damage from all of your summons, and the effect stacks. Great AoE single target. I think that's what good choice nodes should be, is a good option to flavor these really nice abilities rather than just trying to amplify what they already do. So really like that. Thrill of the Hunt now, it gets 2%. So you get 2% critical strike chance, stacking up to 4 times versus 3% at 3 times. So slightly less, but overall more efficient. Dire Command goes from 3 to 2, and each point grants 15-30 chance to trigger. So overall point economy good. And Snake Bite has been removed. Developer's note for marksmanship: Windrunner's guidance being unreliable has added too much variance to a hunter's performance on each dungeon or raid attempt. So basically they want to make wind arrows a little bit more reliable. So basically each wind arrow fires reduce the cooldown of rapid fire by half a second, and every 8 wind arrows increase the direction of your next true shot by 1 second up to a maximum of 10. I think that's interesting because I've seen some parses and some logs where hunters are staying in true shot for almost the entire fight. So I think that's a really interesting gameplay loop. It's something to keep an eye out on. And basically the tooltip fixed Wildfire Bomb to basically say, hey, it does reduce damage beyond 8 targets. We knew that for a long time now. And then they took the Aberrus survival set and baked it into Wildfire Bomb baseline. Great. I love when they can do this. If there's a set bonus that really feels impactful, turning around and making that feel better. Holy Paladin getting the same treatment. They do get a 3% healing nerf, so another nerf to their healing. I still think they're the best healer though, so not a big deal. But they do get Holy Light and Flash of Light get buffs. Again, those single target healing spells, making feeling better. Daybreak now restores 2,000 mana per Glimmer consumed versus 3,000. I think that's, again, going in line with the mana regeneration stuff. Reclamation now restores up to 12% of Crusader Strike and Holy Shock's mana cost versus 15. Again, going in that mana generation goal. And then they reduced the Glimmer of Light heal and damage is now 4% for target versus 6. But they did increase Glimmer of Light's damage itself by 10%, making it so that Holy Shocking a target feels a slight bit better. Priest, Power Infusion reduced to 20% from 25% and from 15 seconds to 20 seconds. I think this is a very good change. Power Infusion, obviously extremely controversial. I still think this makes it so that casting it on as a Shadow Priest is still really good, but the usefulness for the Healing Priest to share it with their friends, with twin priests, twin suns or twin moons of the priestess, still good. I think this ultimately Power Infusion probably just needs to go. I just don't know if it's going to be worth the squeeze long term and for the health of the game. All right, lots of priest changes here. I'll probably consult Newall on them after he takes some time to read them, if he does read them for that. But we'll kind of go over my reactions to this. I'm not a priest player. This is the only class that don't have at 80 or at 70. So take my word for whatever it's worth here. Shadow Word Death deals a flat percentage of the maximum health instead of being based on damage dealt. I like that change. Tithe Evasion now reduces it by 50% to now 4% versus 75%. I think that's good considering it's doing, generally speaking, less damage. Back to the Priests, nerfing the effectiveness of Tithe Evasion I think is good. Shadow Word Death is now reduced by damage reduction effect. So if you disperse yourself right after you hit a fat, juicy Shadow Word Death, obviously you're not going to get 90% on that, so you're going to take virtually no damage as an example. Mass Dispel is on a 2-minute cooldown. All right, so this is I know it's going to cause a ton of controversy. I've been doing a slight bit of reading. This is one change I did know about. And I'm very afraid to go see the discourse on it. Reducing the frequency that priests have access to Mass Dispel as the value of the spell is exceeding the value of other utility at its current power level and cooldown. We're looking to allow for more situations where magic debuffs are applied to multiple players without having a priest trivializing the intended difficulty of the mechanics. The problem with that type of stuff is that you did it all at once. And so having a Mass Dispel was very useful there. And that's the problem. And what made Mass Dispel so powerful is that you would have all these magic effects applied all at once. And then the priest could just trivialize every single one of them by Mass Dispelling. That was the problem. It's not a problem with the spell itself. You probably have bumped it to a minute, but like, I don't think that Mass Dispel itself is the problem. I think it's the way Blizzard implemented these magic debuffs. That was the problem. So improved Mass Dispel is now a PvP talent, so it gets pulled out of the class tree and bumps the reduction of the cooldown to basically make it roughly what it was before. It was 1 minute versus 45 seconds. Improved Mass Dispel no longer reduces the cast time, and it's been basically replaced in the priest talent tree with mental agility, which reduces the mana cost to purify disease and Mass Dispel by 50%, dispel magic by 10%. Cool. Rhapsody now only highlights Holy Nova at max attacks while in combat. I don't know what that means. So, all right, Discipline. Let's look at the developer's note, and then we'll kind of talk about what I generally feel about it. I don't want to go through all of these because I'm at almost at 30 minutes already. The goal of these changes is to simplify Discipline's damage rotation, as well as the number of stacking modifiers used when ramping up for burst healing. Okay, I like that sentence. This should make it smoother to play by reducing the number of abilities pressed in sequence, allowing players to focus on managing atonement and triaging their abilities and triaging their allies instead. Okay, so here's my thought on Disc Priest. Disc Priest is like one of the most satisfying specs to watch a good player play. It just looks really good. And goes really well. So, you know, some people I think of immediately in mode. I think of Automatic Jack. I think of Christus, who's a great Discipline Priest in Mythic Plus. Like, all of them play Disc really well. And so, watching them play Disc at a high level like that is actually kind of fun. The problem with Disc Priest is that the ceiling between, like, the best Disc Priests in the world, they look like absolute world beaters, and even like good, not even great, but good Disc Priests, like the gap between the two is like really big, and sometimes I think that's good and sometimes I think that's bad, and I don't know what to feel about it all the time. So I'm wondering if this is also kind of like, hey, let's make this a little bit less of a barrier of entry for newer players that maybe be interested in trying the spec. So all right, Power Word Solace has been removed. That's good to know. So basically, I'm going to go watch Automatic Jack and I'll let him tell me what I think of this, because I legitimately do not know. Holy, not so long on the changes here. Serenity increased by 30%, Flash Heal increased by 40%. Again, that spot healing that they're doing. Holy Word Salvation is only reduced by 15 seconds instead of 30. Kind of a nerf there to the Salvation CDR, but ultimately I think it fits with what they're trying to do with nerfing healing cooldowns. Symbol of Hope restores 10 instead of 15% missing mana. Falls right in line with that goal. And it's 40 seconds of cooldown for a major defensive ability instead of 60. I think that's also fine. Sanctify now heals up to 5 allies versus 6, which is fine. Keeps it in as a good spell in Mythic Plus still, since you only have 5 allies. Divine Star and Halo basically saw small healing nerfs as well. I think it's fine. Overall, I think these are fine. I think this is a good, again, power shift for Holy. Shadow, poor Shadow, you guys have been getting nerfed all to hell. Shadowcross damage is now reduced beyond 5 targets. Kind of surprised that wasn't the case. So I think if you're a Shadow Priest, you probably are happy that it lasted as long as it did, but it's now like, okay. And then Surge of Insanity and cast from now every 3 casts Devouring Blade instead of every single 1. Interesting. And then Mind Flay damage increased by 10, and Mind Flay Insanity and Mind Spike Insanity also see increases in damage to kind of compensate the small bit of AoE nerfs to give them a little bit more single target. Good stuff. Monk, the fact that it only missed Reavers here, I think is really disappointing. I think Brewmaster and Windwalker both need some help right now. And the fact that they have no class changes in this first iteration of the 10.2 PTR patch notes is very frustrating to me. So just want to express that. Brewmaster in particular needs help. Life Cocoon healing increased by 33%. But, okay. Soothing Mist healing increased by 40%. Still don't want to push the button. Enveloping Mist increased by 25%. Good. Misty Peak's chance to trigger to reduce has been cut in half. I think that's probably fine. Enveloping Breath now heals up to 5 nearby targets versus 6. Again, in line with the, hey, we want to make spread healing, or AoE healing a little less powerful. Invigorating Mist healing increased by 25%, and it's now reduced beyond 5 targets. I'm not surprised by that, so good compensation buff. Burst of Life healing increased by 100%. Vivify Direct healing increased by 30%. Again, spot healing. Clouded Focus now increases the healing and decreases the mana cost of Vivify and Enveloping Mist by 15% versus 20. Maybe that kills Clouded Focus raid builds. I'd be perfectly happy if we did that, because I love Ancient Teachings kick-weaving builds. Speaking of, it got a 40-yard range. Thank the frickin' Lord we can now hit everybody, mostly. Ancient Concordance is now 1 point. Okay, I'm alright with that. And then they redesigned the 2-set bonus for healing. That's fine. Rogue is getting a bunch of changes as well. It's also seeing it now. These changes are in this first iteration of this patch, whereas Demon Hunter was not. I'm gonna go talk to a couple of rogues that I know and see what they think. As someone that, if I played Rogue, would play Assassination, which is basically Feral Druid. I'm looking at maybe making this a little bit better, so I'll read over this myself later. But I've seen some talk about the rogues. The initial concerns are that they're cautiously optimistic on all of it. So good stuff there. So if you're a Rogue player, please tell me again, enlighten me. I don't know a ton about Rogue, so I don't want to necessarily react to this and see like, oh, I'm completely off. I think this is cool actually, right here with Exsanguinate. They're like, hey, there's 2 versions of these because we're going to see which one feels better or does better or feels, gets better feedback, and just implement it instead of getting written and to just discard the other. Cool. I think they should do more of this, honestly. So good job, Blizzard. Shaman saw Mana Spring get reduced. Restoration, same thing. Healing Streams, Healing Surge, Healing Wave. No Riptide? Blizz? Excuse me? Like, Riptide is the Shaman heal now. Like, come on, guys. You forgot a line. Fix the bullet point. And then Demonology kind of getting that same process as Unholy Death Knight does, where they want to pull some power out of Demonic Tyrant and put it into the rest of the kit. So they basically took some steps to do that. Go watch Grandmaster Kalamazzi if you're interested in learning more and more details. My initial thought process on this is good. Affliction got a better, gets more Dark Glare, which is always good for Affliction. I like that. And then Destruction is getting Madness of the Ajakir and introducing a new talent, Chaosbringer, which increases the output of Chaos Bolt, Shadowburn, Rain of Fire. Additionally, adding damage to Chaos Bolt baseline. Basically, they want to decrease how penalizing movement can feel while making these spells feel more powerful. Good. I think that's a good thought process on Destruction. All right, so that's the overall thoughts. So my overall thoughts, I think Warlocks, I think, will be pretty happy. Obviously, at least on paper, I think these are good changes. We'll have to see how they get implemented. I'm sure Warlocks are out there testing, including Kalamazi and Shelle and stuff like that. Out there having some fun, messing around with these specs and seeing what they do. Shaman, I think you're feeling bad. Elemental, I think, needs some tweaks. Restoration, I think, needs some help as well. Riptide not being included in this list, I think, is criminal. So please, Blizzard, rectify that. Rogues, again, tell me what you think. I'm curious. I don't know. I have no clue. As someone that I'm kind of glancing over the assassination changes because that's the spec that I would one trick. I feel like it does. It on paper, it feels like it moves towards the goals that they want for assassination, but I don't know exactly how all of that is going to feel. So tell me. Monk, I've already made it clear. I think Mistweaver, it's fine. Like they made changes that hit the exact thing that you wanted them, that they wanted to hit with the healing changes, but no Windwalker, no Brewmaster changes here. I think is incredibly disappointing for specs that I think need it. Shadow, sorry Shadow, another nerf. I hope your spec's still good. Holy, I think just simply got a power shift, which is good. And then Discipline, I'm just gonna go watch Automatic Jack legitimately and just go see what he thinks about all of this, because he's gonna be able to understand all of this better than I can. I have no, like, all of this I might as well be reading Swahili. All right, Holy Paladin got the shift. Prop Paladin, Ret Paladin not getting many changes, I think is fine, because I think both specs are actually pretty good. Prop Paladin, I think really the biggest reason it's not like being seen everywhere and Guardian Druid is right now is simply because of tier bonus and Guardian kind of getting overbuffed. The Hunter changes I think are good. I actually really like the changes that they made for Hunter. As someone that knows a little bit about Hunter, plays it as like a for fun character. I actually like all the changes that they made for Hunter. So if I'm a Hunter player, I'm happy overall in that regard. The fact that I still don't bring anything to a raid utility wise is pretty sad still. And you're still probably only going to want one or none in a raid, just simply because of everything else that you have to bring utility and buff wise. Devastation, I think we're getting a good power shift for Devastation. Preservation's getting the normal shift here. Restoration Druid, I think, is getting some small nerfs with Grove Guardians, but I think it's mostly focused on nerfing something that's a little bit busted in Flourish and shifting its power. Feral Druid, I really like the changes that Feral Druid's doing. I think the Apex Predators change, I think, is really good. Saber Jaws, we'll obviously have to see kind of what impact it has. It's been a little bit since I've looked at Feral builds. And then Ashamane's Guidance effect, I actually really like. I think this is a good change for Feral. So Feral stocks looking good. As someone that loves Feral Druid, it's my favorite melee spec in the game. I'm pretty happy about that. And I really like the ideas that they're doing behind the Balanced Druid side of things. But we'll see if they go far enough in diversifying the talent builds or diversifying the playstyle. And then the Unholy changes, I'm hoping make the spec feel less bad outside of cooldowns. I would have liked to have seen some things for Frost, particularly trying to rebalance and continue to balance a little bit of the dual wield versus the two-hand argument. Dual wield Breath is fine. I think it's actually better in a lot of raid fights than Obliteration is, but there's no dual wield build for Mythic Plus right now that feels really good unless you pull around Breath, which you need a coordinated group for, and it feels kind of bad. But overall, I think this is a good start. I'll say that. Obviously, we'll get into the PTR and we'll be playing and testing around. Go watch your favorite creators for all of these specs and classes if you want to get more information on it. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to jump on the 10.2 PTR because I got a lot of other things going on in life right now. But hopefully I can get in there and mess around with particularly Monk and Druid because of the specs that I'm going to be, or the classes that I'm considering maining for 10.2. And then we'll go from there. So that's my thoughts on this. I think overall, good start. Some glaring omissions that I hope get corrected. But if you're a specialist in any one of these specs, I'd love to hear from you. So make sure you comment below, like, share, subscribe. You know, all the YouTube bullshit that you have to do on every video in order to get generating views and shit like that. algorithm magic and all that other BS, but whatever. Till the next video, hope you're all staying safe. I hope you're enjoying yourself, you're having fun, you keep on gaming, and I'll see you in the next video.